welcome to our San Mateo County History Museum's, one of our organization's greatest days. That is to accept into our collection the incredibly valuable Norton Pearl photographic collection. My name is Mitch Postal. I'm the president of the San Mateo County Historical Association, and we have some board members here today that are representing our leadership, including John Schroer is here, and Bob Oyster, and Mark Jameson is here from our board. Also John Latorra, I saw, was here. Dee Tolles, our treasurer, is here, and is anybody else walk in that's from the board that I did not notice? Okay. Well, again, welcome members of the association, members of the Burlingame Historical Society, and members of the press for this very important day. Norton Pearl is a native of San Francisco who grew up in Burlingame and has been a photographer since the late 1940s. The contribution he is making today will represent his donation of a lifetime of creative work. Mr. Pearl began his career taking pictures of his classmates at McKinley Junior High School in Burlingame. He developed photographs in a dark room within the family garage. At Burlingame High School, he became photographer for the school newspaper and yearbook. At the same time, he volunteered his time to the Burlingame Fire Department, and his photos of local news events began appearing in the county's newspapers. While at San Jose State, he accepted freelance assignments with San Francisco newspapers. He also worked for the United Press for 3 years until he was hired by San Mateo Commercial Photography Studio. After 2 years, in 1958, he bought this business, and in 1962, moved it to expand its space in Burlingame. Norton Pearl Photography was considered to be one of the largest studios on the San Francisco Peninsula. It provided commercial photography services exclusive to business. These included photography for editorial use, annual reports, trade magazine articles, corporate brochures, advertisements, and catalogs. The studio's hundreds of Peninsula clients range from Hillsdale Shopping Center, Lenkert Electric, Golden Gate Produce Terminal, Hyatt Corporation, United Airlines, to the San Mateo County Fair. The national client list included such corporations as Ford Motors, General Electric, Sylvania, Dodge, Fluor Corporation, Mervyn's, Foremost McKesson, Alexander and Baldwin, Kaiser Aluminum, Hewlett-Packard, and GTE. Assignments for these clients were completed on locations around the world. Mr. Pearl closed the studio in 2012. Since that time, his collection has lived with him and his wife at his home in San Mateo. Mr. Pearl will tell us of the importance, the historical importance of these photos, and then we'll take your questions. So, Mr. Pearl.
I really go by Norton much better than Mr. Pearl. I'm going to see, does this work here okay? How's that? Okay. Gee, Mitch took all of my good material. I do have to say one quick thing. One very important person that's here is my wife. My wife, Alana, who when you're in the kind of business I was in, life is very unpredictable because you really are at the whim of the clients and you don't know what you're going to do next. One other person I just would kind of like to recognize in the audience, not the one sitting next to my wife. He's a really good friend who's a fellow volunteer at SCORE with me, but Mike McQueen. And I'd like to recognize Mike because his father, George McQueen, was the first person to buy a photograph from me to be published in the old Advance. And, you know, looking at the audience here, a fair number of you might remember the Advance. My collection of photography that we've donated to the Historical Association here. I think you need to get a little better understanding of what I was doing and how I was doing it that makes it a little bit different than just typical commercial photography. I managed to get started in photography in the early years, and I did those things that Mitch alluded to very well and enjoyed them. But I realized right after working with United Press that there needed to be a better way for the businesses of the area to better communicate to the people of the area. Everybody at that time was really more word-oriented than visually oriented, and visuals was my thing. So typically a commercial photographer that most of you would think of would go in, the client would say, gee, I want a picture of this microphone, and you would take a picture of that microphone. My approach was, I don't want to take a picture of the microphone. I think people want to know what the microphone's used for. And so we really centered our whole business philosophy on how to make people understand not only what something is, but how it's used and used by whom. And that was kind of the way we developed it. It took a while to maybe convince clients of that, but once they started to understand that they were really now able to communicate a little bit better, they were really excited, I think, more than anything, to work with us and let us have freedom to do things. The collection that we're giving to the museum is not just those things, those images that the client selected, but they are all the images, all of the outtakes, all of the things that were done that communicated at that time what was going on. And I think that in years to come, 20, 30, 50 years from now, whenever, when researchers start to look at things and they start to question not only who did these and what were they, but they will have a better understanding of the why and how it interacted with the community at that time. And so that's really what's being given here is an opportunity, I think, to see the changes that went on. And if you kind of looked at what clients picked to be used, and they're usually indicated on these negatives that we've selected or we've given to the group. But if you see what was not picked, you'll start to get a feeling of how people were thinking, I think, during the time period this was. And it covers about a 60-year time period. I was very fortunate that I had a wonderful staff working with me, and we all really kind of had the same drive in mind. I was, being the boss, it gave me the opportunity to take those assignments that I thought were most interesting, most fun, most challenging. Everybody else got to do the more routine stuff, but that's the joys of being boss. I kind of thinking back on all of this, one of the things that I liked was the unpredictability of what was going to happen each day. Because we never knew what was going to really happen. And that idea that you went in with open eyes to see something, you would see what was going on, you'd select those situations that got across the client's needs, as well as your own creative juices, made it a really wonderful kind of job. It really wasn't work, it was fun. I had the opportunity to photograph important people and very, very common people. Everybody was the same to me. And everybody, in my mind, we worked together, we built relationships about, they wanted to look good, they wanted their product, their companies to look good. And everyone was equal. And it was a really very, very enjoyable thing. And hopefully, as I say, as years go on, you know, and sometimes when people look back, you know, you read an art review about the artist had this in mind, the artist had that in mind about something. Well, I'm no artist. I was just seeing and reporting on what was there. And so in future years, there was nothing meant to be read into what a particular image was. You know, like there's some pictures up there on the wall that I'm sure you, and by the way, this is the first time I have seen that many of my pictures in one place at one time being displayed. And they did a wonderful job with it. I'm impressed. But, you know, people would say, well, you know, he saw the women that were sitting at the fair, and he saw something meaningful in that. It was an image that depicted what was going on. I had some inner motive in doing it, inner feelings about it. It was just, this is what the day is like. This is what's going on there. When newspapers, you know, there are all kinds of these same pictures or similar pictures in newspaper files, in the newspaper, what they call the morgue, the paper. But all you see there is what was selected. You don't see what went into those other things, and that's really what the collection is. Now, I should tell you how this collection got here. The Burlingame Historical Society came to me when they were doing their book on the anniversary, the centennial for Burlingame, and said, gee, do you have pictures from this period? And I said, oh, sure. You know, and so dug through, and we dug out some, and they said, oh, you have a lot of pictures. I said, oh, yeah. You know, we're talking, and I said, well, what are you going to do with them, you know, in the future? And I said, I don't know. I said, well, if you ever decide that you want to, you know, donate them, we'd really be interested in taking them. Okay. Well, a few years later, our son was kind of saying, gee, you really have some good things here. You know, he said they belong in the Smithsonian. Well, I don't quite agree with that, but children are wonderful. So I said, you know, maybe I'll talk to the people at Burlingame and see if they really would like to get these. Because I grew up in Burlingame, went to Burlingame High. Our studio was located in Burlingame for about 40 years. So I went to him and I said, yeah, you know, I think, yes, I'd like to, you know, maybe donate these to you. And I said, well, what do you have? So I said, well, let me bring in a little sample and show you. So I brought in a box and, you know, kind of like a box like this. And in the box were envelopes like this, and in the envelopes, negatives. And they said, oh, well, you know, this looks fine. You know, we could do with that. And I said, well, what you have to realize is how many of them there are. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you will, you know, we've got a couple of the bankers' boxes here. There are really like about 65 banker boxes, which translates into being like about 180 or 190 of this amount of stuff. I said, it's a lot. And they said, oh. Maybe that's a little more than we can handle right. Let us do some checking around. So they did checking with other people. I said, you know, if you want to share them with somebody, that's fine, but I want them to go to one place because my wife loves me and I love my wife, but when you have 65 bankers' boxes full of stuff, even if they're stored in the attic, it's taken up space. And so you know, we wanted to get rid of everything at the same time. And get rid of maybe is the wrong word. So Burlingame did some checking around. They found that it would be difficult for them to do anything with it. They just didn't have the capabilities and size, you know. So they said, let's talk to San Mateo County and see if, you know, Mitch and his group might be interested. So we came down and we talked and we met and we talked some more and we met some more, and then Mitch presented it to his board, and they said, I don't know what happened at that meeting. I assume that there was a fair amount of wine flowing, because they said, yes, we'll take it on. And so then we started, you know, laying out, you know, how we could arrange to do this. So part of the deal with Mitch and the group is that I am going to help them go through some of this material. I've already indicated we were pretty good about this. We kept a card file, and so we have descriptions of every one of these envelopes on what's in them. But the challenge for everyone is going to be to decide what's really most meaningful, because there are, in these, you know, 180 boxes of this stuff, there are about 25,000 different groups of negatives. And it's going to be a case of trying to decide what's most important first and getting those into some sort of a database, and then being able, so people will be able to access it. My hope is that this will be available to the community, that the museum group here will, those things that, because we covered not just San Mateo County, but a good portion of the Bay Area, and assignments that I did for accounts that were based here took me all over the world, really doing work for them. But my hope is that those pictures, those negatives that are of less importance to San Mateo County be shared with some of the other historical societies, that they be able to be used by the community going forward. This was the days before digital, and so thought went into these. In today's digital world, you know, you kind of hold up your camera and hold the button down, and quickly you've got 100 frames. That's not the way things were done in the old days. So thought went into producing these, and I think as time goes on, thought will be put into how they can best be used. I don't think I have the answers as to how to best use them, but I just hope that they will be used greatly by you and everyone around. Thanks. If you have any kind of questions about anything, I'm fair game, and if I don't know it, I'll make it up.
During your career, who was the most interesting politician that you photographed?
Interesting politician? Oh, well, let me preface that by, we didn't do many politicians. Either we were too expensive or too ethical, I'm not sure which. But politicians were like anybody else to me. They were just individuals. And so even though, you know, I spent an afternoon at a Republican thing many, many years ago, and they were doing grip and grin, as we call it, with Dick Nixon. And he wasn't one of my favorite politicians, but he was fun and easy to work with. A Burlingame city councilman was fun and easy to work with. Dan Love, going back, you know, 100 years. Politicians weren't my thing. People were what I enjoyed. And they could, whether they were a politician or not, it was like Leo Ryan, when he got married, I guess it was the second time, I think. But we didn't do wedding pictures, but I knew Leo, and we'd done work, a few things for his campaign. And he said, gee, could you take a few pictures of my wife and I? We were just having a little civil ceremony. I said, sure. So, you know, it's those kinds of things where we built relationships with people and we worked that way with them. Somebody?
In the historical happenings of this season, there's a picture of a pinwheel of airplanes looking down on them from afar.
Right.
Where were you afar?
I was in a helicopter. That was done from a helicopter. That was kind of a fun story about that. That was done for United Airlines Mainliner magazine. And United Jetways, United I guess was the first company to really use jetways, and San Francisco Airport was their first one that they started using them. That was in '58. And we'd been doing some work for Mainliner, and said, we want to get a picture of this. I said, okay. I said, the picture is, you know, planes at all of the jetways, and make a great shot. We'll do it from above, and kind of looked down and said, really nice pattern. So editor of Mainliner said, oh, great, sounds good. Then we started working out the logistics, and they never had 5 DC-8s on the ground in San Francisco at one time. So they said, well, we don't have that. And I said, well, it's not a picture. And they said, well, but we want to get a picture. I said, well, then give me another DC-8. So they did. They brought in a DC-8 from Seattle just for the picture. And because of the plane scheduling going on, I only had about 5 minutes above the thing before a plane had to be taken off the gate and out on but that was really, we built those kinds of trusts and relationships where the companies started to think, fine, you can get across our needs and our ideas visually, because in those days people were not really thinking visual. So that's kind of what happened with that.
I'm friends with a guy, or we used to be co-workers at a student day named Jim Newton, and we're from a obscure town south of here with a lesser climate, a whole other county, but he is now the editorial page editor of the LA Times, has been for a while, and he wrote a biography about Earl Warren. And I'm wondering, I know this is one of your prints of Earl Warren in this newsletter, would I be able to order a custom print of this photo and maybe get you to autograph it and I'll send it to Jim Newton of the LA Times as a holiday gift?
Okay, well,
I do that.
Okay, good question. I mean, we didn't plant him. I want you to understand that. All of that material, as of today, is Mitch's. And I know Mitch would love to have a lot of that used. Whatever arrangements he wants to make is fine. They're in this group that we're giving to the society today. I had gone through, over the past few years, and scanned about 1,000 of these negatives already, and those Mitch can easily get to, or he and his people can get to, and that picture of Earl Warren is one of them, so I would refer you to him.
Is there much difference between ordering something that's printed from the neg versus printed from a scanned version of a positive?
Okay. The negative is the original, before digital, in the real time of photography. The negative is your closest, original source. And you would make your prints from that. And then if you made a copy print, you were still another stage removed. What is occurring now is the negatives, in order to use them, have to be scanned. That scan is kind of that same thing as if you were making an enlargement, making a print. And because it is digital, each one of them is going to be equal. So you're not going to have that loss going forward that you do otherwise in photography in multi-generations. But that is, there is a definite difference in quality between working from taking one of the prints that's here now and making a photographic copy or a digital copy of it versus going from the scan negative to. That was more than most of you wanted to know about photography, I'm sure.
Hi, Norton. I have actually a couple of questions. First of all, do you remember what the first photo was that you sold to Mike's father?
Yes, I do.
What was that?
Okay. I didn't know I couldn't do that kind of, or I should not have been able to get a picture that was really usable with the kind of equipment I was using. But what it was, at Washington Park, in the softball leagues that were going on there in the old days, there was a picture from a visiting team that everybody said was pitching sidearm rather than underhand. And I didn't have the equipment to take pictures of that, but I thought, gee, this is quite a controversy. Maybe I can go get a picture that'll show whether he's sidearm or underhand. So during his warm-up stuff, with actually it was a little Brownie reflex camera and flashbulb, I went out and got behind him. He didn't mind my being behind him because it was just during warm-up time when they were practicing. And I just took some pictures at night with him practicing. Whether it really showed what they really needed, I don't remember that. But I remember it was the first check I got, and it was for $3.50. And it was a big thing. My father was in the photography business on the business side, and they had a facility up in San Francisco so he arranged to have a photographic copy made of that check, and I still have it. So that's what the first published picture, and it was in May of 1947.
So the second question is, you must have had a plethora of equipment. What was your favorite in the black and white times? Because I don't know if I'm even equipped to talk about color, but what was your favorite camera?
Cameras to me were tools. And I got into, I felt very, very comfortable using Nikons because there was a lot of freedom to move around, do things, and get more involved with the subjects. I started out with 4x5 speed graphics. After I got rid of the Brownie reflex, I graduated up. But the 35 millimeter format, I did a fair amount with and enjoyed working with it. I felt very comfortable. And we used a lot of Hasselblads, but there you didn't have quite the freedom, same kind of freedom. Great technical stuff. It would be the kind of thing that I'm drifting off here, but one of the things we would do when we'd go into a new client, because we really wanted them to realize we were professional. This is, you're not just hiring somebody who takes pictures, but you're hiring somebody that really knows what's going on. So I go in with a full case of, I didn't mean to do that, of Hasselblad equipment, and that was a couple of cameras, a bunch of lenses, whole big thing. And I knew I wasn't going to use that. I was going to use one camera, one lens, no big thing. I take it, put it on the floor, open it up, and make a thing of taking something out, and the clients would go, oh. I said, yeah, that's the kind of equipment that the astronauts are using to take the pictures from space. This is, really the good stuff. And, they'd look and, they said, they'd believe what we said, which was great. Any other questions?
Norton, did you ever want to, or did you ever participate in any war or military activities?
No. No, I was not involved in any military activities. Couple of reasons for it. I have a bad back, and that's one of the reasons that I'm retiring early. Otherwise, I might still be going. But that's, you know. But no, didn't get involved in any of that, though I've been in military base situation, done pictures in missile man sites, done pictures of things, but not involved in them.
Norton, I want to say that your son was right in saying that your photographs belong in the Smithsonian. But we're awfully glad that they're not there. We're glad that you came to the Burlingame Historical Society and the San Mateo County Historical Association and decided that this was the proper place. I want to add a little bit of color to one of the stories that you told them. That's the story of how we talked about acquiring this collection. So when Norton came to the Burlingame Historical Society and said he wanted to donate his collection, we were very, very excited, as you can imagine. But when he said he had 250,000 negatives that needed to be gone through to determine what they were of, we thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can do that. So then when we were talking to Mitch, we decided, let's do the math. Let's try to figure out, if we sat down and we went through all of these negatives, how long it would take us. And the figure was somewhere around 20 years to go through them all and figure out what they were all of. So we are grateful that you donated it to this organization. We're grateful also, and I think I'm speaking for Mitch as well, I should, but I will. We're grateful that you're willing to help the Historical Association identify some of these images, because without your help, I think it would be highly unlikely that we would reap the benefits of the collection. So I want to, on behalf of Mitch, thank you for both donating and helping.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
There are some reporters that are in the back. Did you have any questions that you'd like to? Okay, so I think that we're,
Well,
are you ready for our presentation?
Yeah, you know, in order that this be official, we really have to have done paperwork to make it so that they really have got the rights to this. And so, Mitch, here is our memorandum of understanding to you and the association, and our best wishes for, you know, your being able to use this material and to benefit the county and the area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, the 20-year plan is out. And one of the promises that I made to our board when we did accept the idea of taking in the collection was that we were going to get right on this, and we're going to make it available as soon as we can. Whether it's in bits and pieces or large chunks, it's going to be available. Whether that's going to be online or within our library itself or within exhibits or however it is, the public is going to benefit from this sooner rather than later. And that's a promise that I made, and I better stick to it. Otherwise, maybe next year I won't be here. So, but that sincerely, we're going to try to make as much use out of this as we possibly can. For those of you that are with the press and you walked in while the presentation was going on, we have some materials for you, so that please pick that up. I think that there's some good stuff in there that hopefully that you can use. I'd like to thank our auxiliary for putting together a reception that's going to be in the back of the room here, and so I would hope that everybody would stick around and have a toast with us. And Norton's going to be here for a while.
I'll be here
till the wine's gone.
Reminisce.
Okay. And with that, I'll just I'd like to thank Penn TV for being here too. And this is going to be on at some point, Mark. Okay, so Penn TV is here, and they're covering this. And with that, we'll close the formal part of the presentation today, but please stick around and share some refreshments with us. Thank you.